The views expressed on Skeptically Speaking are not necessarily the views of this station, its affiliates, sponsors, or advertisers.
Bring it on, the skeptics await your letter. Your call, tweet, homing, pigeon, whatever. Desiree Shell gonna raise a little hell, metaphorically that is. Cause we're skeptically speaking.
Hello and welcome to Skeptically Speaking. I'm your host, Desiree Shell. This week we're bringing you Beyond 42. How science can use stories to explain life, the universe, and everything. This event was recorded live on Friday, March 9th at the Artery, a non-partisan, accessible community arts venue in downtown Edmonton. It was organized by Marie-Claire Shanahan, Associate Professor of Science Education at the University of Alberta, and a regular Skeptically Speaking guest host. It featured a fantastic cast of scientists telling moving stories about their work and their passion for science. The host of Beyond 42 was Bora Zivkovic. Bora is the blog editor at scientificamerican.com, a regular guest of Skeptically Speaking, and a longtime advocate of the need for scientists to tell stories that communicate the wonder of science and discovery. Bora was in Edmonton as a guest of the University of Alberta Faculty of Education. And now, here's Bora Zivkovic and the cast of Beyond 42.
Human beings are storytelling animals and story-listening animals. You can, think of old, villages where everybody gathers around the campfire and the village elders are telling the stories and the kids are listening. And that's how knowledge about the world was transferred from one generation to the next. Millennia before there was any kind of printing or schools or universities or scientific papers in journals that you can't read because you have no idea what all those acronyms stand for. So one of the sayings that scientists love to say is anecdote is not data. But on the other hand, once you have the data, only your fellow scientists can look at the data and make any sense of it. You have to turn those data into an anecdote again if you want it to be understood by anybody else, or if you want anybody else to be excited about what you're doing as a scientist or about science as a whole. If you look at the media coverage of science, you'll see that there are different kinds of stories. There are fishy stories. Some scientists have, fake data. Or there's something going on, science versus anti-science forces trying to affect policy. Those are, great stories, important stories, but they don't make anybody excited about science. When you only hear about the bad guys. Then there are relevant stories, which, you learn something about, health or environment or something that can affect the way you live your life or, your nutrition or exercise or do you recycle or something like that, or who you vote for, which is very useful, but again, it's not great fun. The third type of story are the cool science stories. There's a cool animal behavior, some spiders being observed to do something absolutely crazy. So exoplanets are really in the news all the time. We're discovering more and more planets far away. So those cool stories are actually the real stories. Those are the kind of stories that I like to read about. Forget the bad guys who are getting kicked out of universities because they fake data and have to have all their papers retracted. Those are dreary stories. And the relevant and useful stories, how much can you trust them? Carrots are good for you, carrots are bad for you, carrots are good for you, carrots are bad for you. Every week it's a different story. It gives you cancer, it treats cancer. It gives you cancer, it treats cancer. The same thing. So it doesn't really impart too much trust on the audience when every little new study is trumpeted as okay, this is how it really works. But the cool stories are really, really cool, and they're absolutely a wonderful way for the audiences, the lay audiences, to get excited about science, because most people remember science from high school where it was boring and hard and they had to memorize a lot of Latin words for the parts of the flower and the classification of worms, and it's like, ugh. They don't want to look for science stories. They think science is boring and tough and hard and something that crazy geeks do. And so they'll go and read about politics, and they'll read about Kim Kardashian and her various sisters and weddings of each one of those and divorces of each one of those. It's so much more fun because those are human stories with characters, sometimes strange characters like Santorum. You have a real narrative where there's characters, there's conflict, there's a resolution. Hopefully Santorum doesn't get the nomination. So this is what we like to hear, and reading cool, cute science stories is what sometimes opens people's eyes. Like, wow, science is cool. Science is actually something that I can be excited about. And then they start looking for science stories. Most science stories are kind of specified science media outlets, like Scientific American, where I work. But who comes to Scientific American? People who already know they're interested in science. So what we're trying to do now is push science in other venues, in other places where people already are. They're not looking for science, they're looking for gossip, or they're looking for, have a nice time with their friends, with beer. So science cafes are happening more and more. A scientist comes in and grabs a mic, and everybody's chatting and having beers and saying, "Let me tell you a cool story." It's always a cool story. It's never a fishy story or a relevant story. It's always a cool story. That science of beer, the science of coffee, those things are happening in science cafes all the time. It's really, really exciting. So having those cool stories is what attracts new audiences to science, and then they see scientists as normal people who are excited about the natural world and discovering cool new things about it. And maybe then they'll support science and scientists better later on, even when it comes to pushing for a particular policy. To cut a long story short, I don't have fun, interesting stories, but we have 4 wonderful storytellers today. And I would like to ask you to be very nice to them. They've never done this before. So this is not the Monti. I'm not Jeff Polish. I'm not going to make fun of them, and I hope you don't either. So I would like to actually call the first storyteller onto the stage, and that is Delos Santos. She's a PhD student here at the university, and what I heard is that she's fascinated by silly headlines in the media about on science stories, and I got a few of her favorites. Study shows young, unsupervised children most at risk for dog bites. Yeah. Another one. Woman stalked by Godzilla, the wild turkey. And Red Bull linked to birth defects really does give wings.
So I was taking an animal behavior class back during my undergrad days, and how our professors would talk about animal behavior is that it's the evolved result of interactions with the environment. So that's why you have camouflage for some animals, or some animals are really brightly colored to indicate their toxicity or that they're venomous. And everyone in class was like, oh yeah, this is going to be really cool, it's going to be really exciting. So our professor said, okay, we're going to go out and do a field study, so you can observe this and take notes. Awesome, this is going to sound pretty cool. Gosh, like what are we doing? What are we going to see? You will be observing for 4 hours the Canada goose. Well, if you've ever seen a Canada goose, for about 5 minutes there isn't a whole lot left to observe. And it was one of the longest 4 hours of my life, and I think everyone else is in our lab. But, we were a bit sad, but we thought, hey, final project is choose your own animal and design your own project. No one chose the Canada Goose. No one chose that. So my roommate and I, who were in that class, we said, okay, let's partner up. We can always work together. We always know where each other are. And our professor, who was an entomologist, said we could use his lab and any specimens that we could grow from it. We said, okay, what are we going to do? Let's work with maggots. Let's do that. We're short on time. It only takes a couple days to grow. Let's do it. Okay. Well, maggots thrive on rotting food. But there's some kind of food, if you think about it, that the older it gets, the better it gets. Like cheese, right? So he said, do maggots like cheese? I don't know. Or do they prefer rotting food? Okay, let's find out. Let's do it. So we had to prepare our samples. So, we started growing low-fly maggots in the lab. And then we said, okay, what are we going to do for food? Well, okay, let's go to a grocery store and let's get some liver, let's get some cheese. How are we going to get it to rot? Well, we took the liver and threw it behind the fridge for about a week. Took the cheese, put that in the broom closet for about a week. Our other two roommates were not happy with us. And we said, okay, now let's go to the lab and do this. And we said, oh my God, this really smells. Like, this is really potent. Like, what are we going to do? Well, we could use any lab that was available, and all the labs were 24 hours. So we said, okay, we're going to work at school when no one will see us, so that no one knows that we're doing this. So we said, okay, when is school free? On a weekend, at about 2 or 3 in the morning, when no one should be at a lab if they've been going out that night. So we said, okay, so that's when we worked in the lab. And so what we did is we set up kind of like a race. So we had a starting line, and then the maggots all up here, and a barrier, and then we had the food. One part was cheese, one part was the liver, and then we lifted up and timed them, and then see where they'd race, see where they'd go first. Race is probably a wrong word when you're working with maggots. And so we did that for a few weekends, and then finally we were done. And so, we get home, so we're writing on our board and, doing all our other final work. So during school, we're working away, and then there's this smell in the hallway. And we didn't think anything of it, so there's always some kind of weird smell every now and then. So no big deal. But the smell started getting stronger and stronger, and the school started noticing. And there started being warning posters, all throughout the school. We started getting notification emails. There's this unknown smell, and the cleaning staff are really trying to figure out what it is. We're like, God, this is really weird. It's never happened before in school. My roommate comes home one day. She says, do you know that smell? All those warnings, all the posters? I'm like, yeah, that's us. I'm like, I don't smell. I don't know what you're talking about. And she said, no, I went to the locker today because I had to, I wanted to put some stuff, I wanted to put my notebooks away. I'm like, okay, yeah, and? That rotting liver and the rotting cheese, we left it in the lockers from when we last worked for about 2 weeks. That had permeated the entire wing where all the lockers were. Yeah. And I said, we really need to clean that up. Are we going to apologize? Do we tell the school? She's like, I don't want anyone to know that we did this. And I said, yeah, me too. I don't want anyone to know. And she said, okay, we're going to do the same thing as before. We'll go in at about 4, 5 in the morning, take it out, Febreze the hallway, and then go. So we did that. No one knew who we were. A couple of days later, hallway no longer smelled. So lesson learned, keep track of all your research materials as much as possible.
Thank you, Sol. That was wonderful. Our next storyteller is Greg Henkelman. He's a biology teacher, high school biology teacher at Strathona High School. Did I pronounce that correctly? Okay. He's interested in literacy in science and even a little bit of alchemical philosophy, whatever that is. All right. Come on, Greg.
All right, well, my story begins with something that all science teachers have to do, and that is at some point they have to take a field trip. Especially if you're a biology teacher, you're going to have to do a field study in Alberta. So my field study relates to Elk Island National Park. So for those of you who have been there recently, you know it is a very beautiful park that we have. It's not Jasper, it's not Banff, it's Elk Island. And there aren't really that many elk you can see there, but there are bison. And so when we take students from Edmonton out to Elk Island, it's always very interesting because many students have never seen living things other than human beings or domesticated pets. And so when they see a bison for the first time, it scares the hell out of them. And so when we go on these field trips, it's always something I keep in the back of my mind. I hope we see a bison. I hope we see a bison. Because I love watching kids get really scared about bison. And this one field trip we were on a further away trail from the other group. And I kind of have this reputation for things never going right when we do this field trip. And the students kind of know this. I don't know how the word gets out, but teachers get a reputation. And I get a reputation of something will always go wrong in Henkelman's class. I don't know why that is. We were out walking, and we were walking, and we were walking, and there were aspen poplar everywhere, and grasses, and aspen poplar look the same, no matter which direction you look. So inevitably the question comes, Mr. Henkelman, I think we're lost. We're not lost. We're okay. Walking. Oh, look, aspen poplar. Yes, we know aspen poplar. We can identify that plant, thank you. Walking. Eventually I turn around and say, you know what? I think we're lost. And the students go, oh, no. So we turn around because it was a trail, and it was only going one way, and I figured it was probably a loop that would probably take us 5 hours, and we had to get back to the bus. So we start walking back, and I'm double timing it, and the students are trying to keep up, because the other thing that city kids, they don't hike that often, apparently. And so they're getting very tired, and this is where you can feel very virile as an adult, because, hey, I can actually move faster than these kids. It's fantastic. But as we're walking, in the trail in front of us, coming around a corner, was a bison. Standing there. A full-grown male. Great beard. Huge horns. Standing on the trail. And the students were catching up to me, breathing really heavy. Why are we stopping? Can we rest? Can we sleep? Can we lie down here for a while in the grass? I'm like, be quiet. And we looked, and in front of us was a bison. We wouldn't have seen that bison if we hadn't got lost. And that really is what I wanted to talk about tonight, is getting lost in science and all those opportunities to get lost. You know, people tell you all the time, get lost. I take it personally and seriously when someone tells me to get lost. Obviously, I get my students lost. And usually when we get lost, it's something good. And that's kind of been one of the things with field trips. Students have said, I hope we get lost this year, because weird things happen when Henkelman gets lost. And I get lost a lot teaching, too. I get lost telling stories, actually. I get lost diverging away from what I'm supposed to be teaching. And that's when I find students really catch on. I think the stories, it's so important what you were mentioning about sitting down with elders and with children to talk about things, because it's really the stories that connect us. But going back to this being on the trail and the fear the students have of seeing a bison, I'm finding more and more that science students are really afraid to veer from the path that's laid out before them. They're afraid of leaving the concrete where the data is smooth and easily interpreted, and getting off into those areas of paradox where your data is scattered and you don't know what to do with it. Do I draw a best fit? How do I draw a best fit line on this thing when I'm on connect the dots? That's all you can do. The data sucks, really. So you just have to connect the dots. They're like, but what are we learning in this lab? And that's the question. What are we learning? You're lost. Is that a bad thing? I don't think it is all the time. Science is not that clean all the time. But when students expect to be led down a path, and that's all they've done their whole lives, they've never been in the wilds of obscure data, they're scared to go there. And that's one thing as an educator I'm trying to do more and more is take those stories and get away from hard facts. So instead of talking about plant parts, why not talk about Mother's Day and how awkward it is that you're giving your mother reproductive organs to say you love her. You know, that's a little awkward if you stop and think about it. Plus they're decaying reproductive organs. We wouldn't do this with human sex organs or, you know, drinking milk. Just a simple process. It's so important, right? Kids go, yeah, we need to drink milk. But you're drinking from a cow. And you suggest to kids, why don't we drink from humans? And they're like, oh, Henkelman, drinking milk from humans, that's ridiculous. Like, but what do you think the cows think of us? You know, it's a whole other interpretation of mad cow right there. You're taking milk away from their babies, right? It's kind of a sad thing. But why do we drink milk? We're adults. We don't need milk. And kids, sometimes they take these questions like, you're so crazy. Like, what are you talking about? But you hear them talk about it in the hallways. And it does. It gives them something to think about. So if there's one thing I could maybe leave you with tonight it's look for those times when you have an opportunity, a teachable moment, to get away from those smooth paths, to take the kids off the trail, and take those moments when they get lost. And don't try to correct it right away. Let them stumble back and find their way back to the path. Because in front of you is going to be a spiritual experience almost. It's not just science anymore. It's revelation. It's an epiphany. It's eureka in the truest sense of the word. Thank you.
You're listening to Skeptically Speaking. I'm your host, Desiree Schell. We'll be back with more of Beyond 42, how science can use stories to explain life, the universe, and everything, after this.
Skeptically Speaking wants you to question everything. To be a part of the discussion, call and record your question on our listener question line at Speak 73101. That's 773-257-3101. Long-distance charges may apply. Sunday nights at 6 Mountain Time, join our Ustream chat room to listen and ask questions as we record interviews live. Just click the Listen Online button at skepticallyspeaking.com. You can also email your questions and comments to live@skepticallyspeaking.com, or if you're on Twitter, tweet us at Skeptical Radio. To find out where Skeptically Speaking airs near you, to listen to past episodes, or download the weekly podcast, check out our website at skepticallyspeaking.com. While you're there, follow the links to connect with us on our Facebook page, our Twitter feed, or to subscribe to the show in iTunes. And now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Skeptically Speaking. I'm your host, Desiree Schell. This week, we're bringing you Beyond 42, how science can use stories to explain life, the universe, and everything. And it was recorded live at the Artery in downtown Edmonton. Now, back to your host for the evening, Bora Zivkovic.
I was kind of an odd kid in our whole family. The whole family was very much in humanities, the theater, the art, the literature kind of stuff. And except for, one of the, great uncles and me, nobody else was into science. But even as a little kid, I loved animals, and, we would go out and, don't get dirty. But what is this bug? I have no idea. So there was no way for me to, learn about the natural world because nobody around me knew, to tell the birds apart. I mean, okay, pigeon. Everybody knows a pigeon. It's a big city, Belgrade. There's pigeons. There's crows too. I became a laboratory scientist. I arrived in the United States in '91, 1 week before the first of the series of wars broke out there. Kind of last train out to London, and then a flight to JFK in New York, and then straight out to North Carolina. And I've been in North Carolina for 20 years, and I'm not moving out. This is my second telecommuting job. So I'm applying for a job, so I'm not moving. And so, if they want me, they'll hire me anyway. So this is my second successful telecommuting job. And just because the office headquarters are far away, it doesn't mean that I don't like to travel and come to places like Edmonton, where I have to say I'm having great fun this week. It was funny, you travel and you live tweet your travels, and then all these other Canadians are saying, "Why are you going to Edmonton? Why not Vancouver or Toronto?" And it's like supposedly fun places. So, well, Edmonton won. I have friends in low place. No. I have the right kinds of friends who bring me to a wonderful place here, and I've had a wonderful week here. So I want to thank Mary Claire again for inviting me and organizing this whole trip. But let's, instead of me telling stories, let's get real storytellers on the podium now. And our next one is Monica Chahal, who is a science teacher and a doctoral student in the Department of Science Education here at the university. A devoted conservationist who wonders why she can't keep plants alive. Come on.
Real storyteller, a bit of a lead-in. Okay, so hi. I'm about to say something that might seem very odd, but as a child, I did not like science. Sorry. Well, it might seem odd as a passionate science teacher, but in school I found science extremely frustrating. I found it difficult, and the thing that I loved about science wasn't necessarily the subject as much as my teachers, specifically Mr. Barrington. I don't know what he taught me, but he used to yell at me all the time. We're off as a crazy herd of turtles. That was what he did. I want some sugar for my coffee. That was it. That's all he did for 3 years. That's what I learned. So it was a bit odd to everyone around me when I decided to go into an environmental conservation degree. And it was solely because of Mr. Barrington. Now, I graduated from my degree and followed with my true passion, which was working with kids. I went into education. And I then, because of my degree, ended up teaching science. So it was quite interesting. I wondered often what Mr. Barrington must think. I was a girl who knew genus and species names. I knew everything that swam, crawled, or sang in Alberta. I did not know stoichiometry. It was a bit of a problem. Taught in Edmonton for a year in a beautiful upper middle class junior high. Figured I need a change, so let's move to London, England and work in an all-boys inner-city school. Yeah, talk about a change. Now, being the only consistent female science teacher in an inner-city boys' school, I have a multitude of stories. And I've chosen not to share any of those with you. So what am I going to talk about? Now, am I going to talk about the sad stuff? Their lives? No, I think that's a rather depressing topic. The success stories? Unfortunately not enough. The blatant self-promotion? What did I do with the kids? No, I'm going to avoid that. The laughter and the drama and all of that, which there was plenty of? No. I decided to talk about something more basic. Fire. Yes, thank you. So, my school, now I like the Golden Girls, this is a nod to my roommate. Picture it, Sophia, right? Picture it, London, 2004. Brand new science building. I've got 5 lab benches with a sink in the middle, Bunsen burner taps, 3. I've got interactive whiteboards in the front. This is a building devoted to science. The first floor, chemistry. Second floor, biology. Third floor, physics. You think of the order as you wish. And it was my classroom. Now, in a school that is about 400 years old, it's very unique to say, I'm the first teacher to have taught in this room. It's a pretty major thing. So, I'm teaching. Right? I'm teaching my students, yay! We're in a high-tech room. Yay, let's see some high-tech equipment. Spirit burners. Anyone know what those are? Yeah, they just hold alcohol and you light them. That's equipment we had. And we're doing calculations of some kind. I can't quite recall what we were doing. I'm at the front. Then I hear it. Miss! Now, anyone that's worked with kids or has children knows when you hear that scream, you slow down. Time stops. I turn. Kids are running past me. And all I see is the back bench in flames. Right. So I yell, shut off the gas tap, and I go into alpha Monica mode, right? I'm like getting kids out of the way. Now, we don't have fire blankets. Now, and working in that school, I became very resourceful, so I figured out a way to put the fire out. I got all the kids out, everyone was safe, nothing was damaged, theoretically. It was all good. Next day came in, well, needless to say the lesson was over. Next day came in, figured, okay, I'm going to have to write a few reports, right? Nothing major. Until I was told, you were the first teacher here in 25 years, and that's as far back as they could go, who's ever had a fire. I was like, oh, great. No, is it a Canadian thing? No, I think it's just a Monica thing. Sorry about that. So, next year, 2005, kids come in. You're the teacher who had the fire. And there's, of course, the bench, this beautiful bench that was brand new, half of it scorched in flames. And so I can honestly say I left a tangible mark in London. Right? Not many people can say that. And then I left. So now, picture it, 2011, Edmonton, Alberta. I'm working at the University of Alberta, I'm a first-year student, and I'm thinking, yes, I'm working with undergrads. They totally know what they're doing. I'm not going to have any fire mishaps. I was naive. And we go on, and we're teaching our lesson. And in undergraduate science education, they do a mock teaching experiment. I'm in the classroom, hopefully, sounds familiar perhaps. I'm in the classroom with a bunch of students. I have students across the hallway in a lab. Door flings open. Monica! Again, time slowed down. Fire! All right, run out of the room. I'm like going through this misty, cloudy hallway into the lab. All my students are standing around. Fire in a chemistry lab. Not the lab, sorry, the prep room. So it doesn't take a scientist to know that a fire in a room of flammable material is not a good idea. The girl who started the fire had a previous degree in chemistry and had decided that her research consisted of looking on how to do this experiment on YouTube. Surprisingly, it did not work out. So I went into now I'm beyond Alpha Monica because I've had a lot of experience. I'm like Superman Monica. So I'm like getting this fire out, everyone's good, everyone's safe, great. Except that there was one thing that we didn't have back in England, fire alarms. And it's the winter, it's last winter, so you remember how cold it got, like about -30? So I informed her that if the alarms were going off, I was going to make sure the entire Faculty of Education knew it was her. Because I wasn't going down, I'd only just started. Luckily, didn't happen, right? No alarm, so I thought, great. This is all we have is a good story, a girl who feels very embarrassed, and we all smell like a campfire. And then it happened. Someone came up to me and said, Monica, in my recent memory, you're the first teacher to have a fire on this floor. So, the moral, I begin to think, okay, is this me? Like, am I creating these lessons that obviously create these accidents? And I would like to hope no, it's not just me. What I'd like to think instead is that in my classroom, science is chaos. And like a fire, science is unpredictable. And I was the kind of teacher that fostered that unpredictability. I did not scream or yell when a contained accident occurred. I actually promoted my students to discover things. I encouraged them to take the lead. And this particular undergraduate student, which was so funny about her, was that when I was teaching her, and I tried to explain to her about letting kids discover, she just didn't want anything to do with it. She believed science was, you write it on the board, you tell the kids what to do, they do it, and then you do an experiment to prove what you just told them. And that was science. And no matter what we talked about over the months, she just did not think science could be any other way. So the week after her fire, I thought it was quite interesting when she told me that the fire was the best experience she'd ever had as a student teacher. And like you, okay, why is that the best experience? And then she told me the day after the fire, she was tutoring at a nearby elementary school. And this little boy ran past her, crying, screaming, "I broke science." And she was like, what, pardon? "I broke science." "How did you break science?" "I was doing an experiment, I put this thing in the other thing, and nothing happened." Now, for a teacher, it's a very cute expression, but it could potentially be very dangerous if he really believes that he broke science. There's only one way to do science. So she said, "No, you did not break science. Let me tell you a story." And she told him about her fire the day before. His tears turned into laughter. She also told him not to believe everything he saw on YouTube. And she told him there's no one answer. Science is unpredictable and it doesn't always work. Which anyone who's ever done an experiment knows that's true. And what I found interesting is in all the months that I taught her, I could not have taught her what she learned through that fire. That fire was what actually gave her the lesson of the unpredictability of science. And so ultimately, I think the real lesson is Mr. Barrington would be very proud of me.
There's Monica Chahal. That was fiery. Kind of scared. I didn't know where she was going with that, and also now I'm worried. You had fire alarm. Okay, our next storyteller is Courtney Hughes. She's a PhD student in conservation biology here at the University of Alberta. She studies the social side of grizzly bear conservation. I don't know if it's humans or grizzlies' social side, but maybe we'll learn more. But grizzlies are not what gave her the scariest research experience, and I think we are going to hear which one it was. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I even start speaking, I'm kind of glad there's bright lights and it's blinding a little because my heart is racing. It's kind of nerve-wracking to be up here and to talk about the science of your bodily functions when you're speaking would be kind of interesting, but that's not my talk tonight. So when I was approached by Marie-Claire to talk tonight, I was like, what am I possibly going to share that would be interesting to anyone? I don't think I'm that interesting. I don't think my science experiences have been that interesting. And so I kind of was freaking out, kind of really freaking out. And then I thought, okay, I've had some cool things. I've done some cool things. I've learned some cool things. I can share those things. So I'll share my story starting from my journey through being a teacher to where I've ended up now, which is kind of the social side of conservation science. I started about 6 years ago with a Bachelor of Science degree and a concurrent degree in education, and I became a science teacher. So like Monica, I taught at an inner city school, and I taught grade 8 students. Grade 8 kids are awesome, most of the time. They are hormonal, they have attitude, they're gross, sort of. The things they say, the things they ask you, the things they do in science class blows your mind, and it causes you to think outside the box. But it was a diverse experience for me. I experienced so many things with those students, and I was able to share, I hope, my passion for science with them and really get them engaged in science. So that was the start. From there, I said yes to any opportunity that came my way, even though it didn't seem like science in the beginning. I wasn't doing any experiments. So recently I've been working in Belize. I've been working with pre-service and in-service science teachers and taking them on field excursions, showing them different ways to teach science. And most recently, when we were there just last year, we're exploring this gorgeous mangrove swamp. It's this beautiful jungle setting. And I'm pretty new to jungle. I grew up in Canada. I've been to some places, but jungle is new. Boreal forest is old news for me. Does anyone know what a peccary is? Yeah? Yeah? They're ornery little buggers. They're toothy. They're kind of like a small pig. Maybe around 20 kilos was the small herd, the size of the peccaries in the small herd. And the guide that we were with, I know some things about jungles, but the guide we were with said, don't run from the peccaries. Stand your ground, stand firm. So I'm like, okay, it's like handling a bear. I got bears. I know bears. I can do this. I booked it out of there. Those peccaries come at you, toothy, tusky, snorting, running. I'm flying past my teachers, and there are my science teachers watching me go. And I'm thinking, yeah, I'm that Canadian. That's an awesome role model right there for how to do science in the field. Since then, I've also worked in, I've learned in and worked in Botswana and Tanzania. I've been on some cool field courses where we were learning about ecosystem management, some environmental sociology stuff, some political ecology. And it was really cool because we were learning from the people in a place that was a context totally different than my own. And I also learned firsthand what parasitic infections can do to you and what not to do when you think the water is safe to drink because you've been told it's been purified, but it hasn't. And then what happens to you physically when you have a parasitic infection. It's not fun. It's horrible, but you learn a lot about parasites. First-hand, experiential learning at its best. However, all of that aside, my most memorable experiences were during my Master's of Education degree, which doesn't seem very sciencey, but it was, in environmental education in Namibia, Africa, where I was working with cheetahs at the Cheetah Conservation Fund. So I was predominantly there to work with the children who lived in farming communities and farming families and learn about their experiences in an environmental education program and what that does for cheetah conservation, their values for cheetahs, their relationships with cheetahs. And that was tremendous. It was amazing to use storytelling, actually, as my research methodology to learn about children's values for cheetahs. I was also able to appease the biologist and the ecology lover in me and do some radiotelemetry. We were out walking in the savannah, stalking cheetahs with really low-grade tech, but it works. You're watching out for warthogs, and you're watching out for snakes all the while, which I was not good at doing. And collecting, the glamorous job of collecting fecal samples in the field, that was awesome. Every field tech dreams of doing that. And we were also working with livestock farmers and conflict mitigation management, which was really cool so that they could improve their livelihoods and we could improve cheetah conservation. So it was social dimensions of science and biological, ecological dimensions of science. And it was awesome, and it opened my eyes to so many things that I've hopefully carried into my future and into now. The best experience, though, I had was when I asked to participate in a lab workup on a cheetah. They had several resident cheetahs, males and females, and several wild cheetahs that would come in, stay a while, and be released again after they had their examination. They were doing this for genetics and fertilization research. So I wanted to entertain a fleeting dream I had once of being a veterinarian. And I thought it was glorious, working in the lab with wild animals, particularly big cats, it's my thing. So I walk into the lab, and I'm expecting to collect some hair samples, some skin samples, do some monitoring, heart rate, respiratory rate, all that stuff, doing the tracking and the reporting, and that was cool to me. Instead, I was handed a 10-inch long probe. It was plastic with a rounded tip, and it had a little box connected to it with some dials. And I'm looking at this thing thinking, what am I supposed to do with this? I have no idea what this is. And then the lab tech that was there handed me a bottle of lubricant. And I'm looking at this probe and the lubricant and thinking, you've got to be kidding me. Has anyone here ever electroejaculated a cheetah? Or used an electroejaculation machine at all? I have. I was not expecting that. But I was open to the opportunity, open to the experience. So I lube up the probe. That was the motion. You got to get it all around and good. And I was probably as red as I am now. I was a young, naive girl in Namibia lubing up a probe, ready to violate a male cheetah on a table. So this poor bugger is laying out there. He's sedated, but he's kind of still with it, just a little, because of the type of sedation they use. And I'm like, oh, how am I going to do this? So the lab tech said, it's easy, you just stick it in there. You stick it in there, and she cranks it up. And she said, you're going to get some secretion. You don't want to collect that. I'm like, oh, good. I don't know what I want to collect right now. And she's like, I'll control the stimulation, you just probe so that you hit the prostate. Oh, good, thank you. I'm glad that this is what I'm doing right now. All the while, this male cheetah is growling, making these like facial expressions. His toes are curling back so far in his hind legs, I didn't think it was possible. And the tail is just going. And I'm like, I am responsible for this dream right now. This is all me. So after about 2 minutes of probing and stimulation, and a rip-roaring good time for that guy, we collect our sample. And it was a good sample. And the cool thing was, later on in the week, after I recovered from my embarrassment and I could face the other lab techs and that cheetah, I was able to see the insemination, the actual fertility treatment, and the whole reproductive process in the female. And that was really cool. So the whole point to my story is talking about the different things that I've done, is to demonstrate that science is diverse. There's so many different opportunities that you can have when you have some passion for science. You don't even need a degree, right? You can do anything you want if you have that passion for science, if you have an inquiring mind. And so being open to all these opportunities, embracing the diversity, has been the best for me, and I hope that I can have the same types of experiences with grizzly bears, although not necessarily probing them. I'm okay with collaring, that's fine. I'm good with that. But I'm hoping that the diverse experiences continue for me, and I hope that maybe for any of you or people you know, you can expose people to those types of opportunities. Thank you.
Beyond 42 was recorded live at the Artery in downtown Edmonton, Alberta, and was sponsored by the University of Alberta Faculty of Education. Thank you to our storytellers, Delos Santos, Greg Henkelman, Monica Chahal, and Courtney Hughes, and of course Scientific American blog editor Bora Zivkovic for acting as our MC. And a very special thank you to Associate Professor of Science Education at the University of Alberta and regular Skeptically Speaking guest host, Marie-Claire Shanahan, because she organized the event and it was wonderful.
On the next episode of Skeptically Speaking, we're looking into the many strategies that animals employ in the struggle to eat other animals. We're joined by freelance science writer Matt Soniak to discuss the often complex relationship between hunter and hunted. And biological anthropologist Greg Layton returns to tell us about humanity's history as hunters and how it may or may not affect our behavior today. That's next week on Skeptically Speaking, on your local radio station, or online at skepticallyspeaking.com.
Welcome back to Skeptically Speaking. I'm your host, Desiree Schell. We'd like to wrap up this episode on storytelling and science with a piece performed by Marie-Claire Shanahan. It was recorded live during Science Online 2012 at the Monti in Raleigh, North Carolina. The Monti is a popular storytelling series that invites ordinary people to tell extraordinary stories without notes in front of a live audience. For more information or to check out the Monti podcast, go to their website at themonti, that's Monty with an I, .org.
I have been a science teacher as long as I can remember. And that's not usually one of those things. People say that about writing, like that they were passionate to tell stories. Not many people say they were science teachers when they were kids. But in my case, it actually is true. My dad built me a miniature schoolhouse in our backyard. I had desks, and I made my friends sit in them. I had a library, and I made little cards, and my friends couldn't borrow the books unless they took a card. And I would lecture them on things like why the Hindenburg shouldn't have been filled with hydrogen, and that was really important. So I'm not lying. It's not kind of a rhetorical thing where I say I've been a science teacher as long as I can remember. I really have. So because of that, as an undergraduate student, I was an engineering student, and I got really passionate about doing engineering outreach. And I was part of a group that did science camps for kids, and we would do workshops in schools. We'd show up, and it would be super fun. We'd be really excited, and we'd pull out a crate of awesome materials. We'd light stuff on fire, and then we'd build roller coasters, and we were the fun, awesome people that came in for 2 hours in a classroom to tell kids that science is really amazing. And the typical way we did it, I said we showed up with a big bundle of materials, and we would tell them something really cool, like about, I was waiting to see how I was going to say that. We would tell them something about flight principles, or we would teach them about certain kinds of chemical reactions, and then we would give them a challenge project. So it was basically, here's something cool we know. Now, here's something you can build, or a problem that we want you to solve, and we'd mostly spend the time doing that. And it worked really well. We were really popular. We were booked through the whole year to do these. Because of that experience, when I graduated from undergrad, I was invited as part of a small group of students to go to a really remote northern Cree community. This was in the northern part of Ontario. And so I found myself with two friends living in a house with no furniture in a town where only half the town had electricity. And I don't mean that half the town chose not to have electricity or that half the town couldn't afford to have electricity, but literally half the town didn't have infrastructure for power. And down the street from us, we lived on the side that had power, but no furniture. But just down the street from us was Goodwin Video. It was actually, the sign said Goodwin, Video, and so we called it Goodwin, At Goodwin, you could rent a movie. Really old movies, but you could rent a movie. Goodwin, was on the part of town that didn't have power. So while you could rent a movie there, the people who owned the store could not watch a movie at home. Also at Goodwin, was to be found a lot of warm Diet Coke. That's significant. It's true. Sitting on a wooden shelf. That's significant not just because I really love Diet Coke. I'm kind of obsessed with it. But because the Diet Coke was actually cheaper than the bottled water you had to buy because the water in the tap was so full of iron, it was red. And for kids would get sent. We saw kids with Coke, drinking Coke, the 2- and 3-year-olds drinking Coke out of bottles because it was cheaper than water. So I found myself with these friends, and we were so excited to be there. We wanted to share our love for science with students in really remote schools, teachers who were very excited to have guests. We brought up really awesome materials. And we also worked with local elders in the community. We really wanted this to be a partnership program. So we took the kids out on trapping trips and talked about elasticity of willow branches and why that makes it really good for building rabbit traps. So we did these cool partnerships. I learned an incredible amount doing those. But the science stuff we did was the usual stuff. We built roller coasters. We built bridges. Actually, no, I shouldn't say. We tried to build bridges. And then when you start off those lessons, you always ask kids, what do you notice about a bridge? And they tell you about the trusses that they've seen, except that there was no bridges within like 200 miles. So they couldn't tell us anything. But we switched it to building a bush shelter, and the students did amazingly well. It was a great project. And also, like lots of camps, we built model rockets, model rockets is fun no matter what. It's like space, dinosaurs, and rockets. If you do those with kids, you're awesome. And they'll go with you, and it'll be really fun. The weather was kind of bad, though, so when we launched them, the rockets landed all over town. They were on people's roofs. They were in the hospital parking lot. They were everywhere, including our neighbors' roofs as well. We kept trying to figure out how we could get it from the neighbors' roofs without telling them there was a rocket on their roof. But that was really fun as well. One of the things near the end of the week, another thing we always did was have a family science night. And so this is an opportunity for the kids to come with their little brothers and sisters and their moms and dads and their grandparents and their neighbors and their aunts and uncles to hear about what we did at science camp. And so the kids were wonderful. Some of the older students did a chemistry show entirely in Cree, which was a really cool experience for me to see. And the parents would come and talk to us, and most of the parents didn't speak English, so the kids would translate and talk about the activities that they'd done. Near the end of the night, a grandmother came up to me, and she walked up slowly, and she stood in front of me, and she didn't say anything. And I stood there for a couple of seconds, and I thought, well, maybe she only speaks Cree. Where's her grandson? Maybe I can find him. Maybe she wants to talk to me, but can't because she doesn't speak English, and I don't speak very much Cree. So I just start looking around the room to see if I can spot her grandson, when all of a sudden she starts talking, and in a slow, careful, thoughtfully considered tone says to me, "It's nice that you're here to teach our kids, but why are you teaching them to build weapons? If that's what you're here to do, I don't think you should be here." I was stunned. I was shocked. It was like someone had just punched me. I couldn't speak. I was hurt. I was perplexed. I didn't know what she meant, but she was really visibly upset. And oh wow! By the time I sort of had collected myself, she was gone, and I didn't know what to make of this. I went home and talked to the two girls that I was there with, and we didn't know what she was talking about. Weapons? We built shelters. We built traps. We launched rockets. I mean, this is fun. This isn't weapons. So the next day at camp, I asked the kids too. I said, "Do you know what she's talking about?" And most of the kids just shrugged and didn't say anything. Like, oh, I don't know. And they were a little uncomfortable about it. And finally, one of the older guys said, "Rockets mean something different here. They do like tests and stuff." And I was speechless again. This time, not out of shock, but out of embarrassment. All of it came together. Canadian Arctic, like a lot of sparsely populated areas, that's where it's okay for satellites to crash. That's where it's okay to test launch things. Not too long ago, in September, when there was a NASA satellite that was maybe going to crash in Canada, the curator for the Science and Technology Museum posted a bunch of photos of old warning signs that they used to have in the Arctic about staying away from crashed and exploded materials. And what I realized in that moment is we had not even stopped to think about the science we were doing, what it actually meant. We took the same model. We went up and thought, I'm going to tell you something cool, and then you're going to enjoy it, and it'll be fun. I didn't stop to listen at all to understand what the science we were doing actually meant to the community and the kids, and what something like rocket might have a completely different interpretation. And in that moment, I think my course was set for doing the type of things that I do. The reason I'm interested in scientific literacy, the reason I want to help people understand context of science and what it is from that experience of learning that thinking about who people are when we're talking to them, thinking about blog readers and students and anyone that we're communicating science to, thinking about who they are is not an add-on, it's not a bonus. It's essential. The process breaks down without it. And that, for me, is why I do what I do right now, is really thanks to that kid's grandmother. And some cool rockets. Thanks.
You'll find links to more information about all of this week's storytellers on our website at skepticallyspeaking.com. While you're there, click the links to Facebook, Twitter, and to Google+, so that you can keep up with show news, and to iTunes, where you can subscribe to the program or listen to past episodes. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week on Skeptically Speaking.
Bring it on, the skeptics await your letter. Your call, tweet, homing, pigeon, whatever. Desiree Shell gonna raise a little hell, metaphorically that is. 'Cause we're skeptically speaking.